I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is Our Nerdiest Thing.
This season, we are discussing Jennifer L. Armentrout's From Blood and Ash, all of the books in that series, plus the Flesh and Fire series as well. We are spoiler friendly, so listen at your own risk. Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to Our Nerdiest Thing. Today we are discussing Jennifer Armentrout's From Blood and Ash, chapters 35 and 36. Before we get into it, Deborah, will you share about our nerdiest cocktail?
You mean the one I've already had a couple of? Which is going to make this episode so funny. No, I'm kidding. I don't know if it will or not. I think, alcohol does make you more giggly, at least. Okay, so this week, our cocktail has blackberry whiskey in it, which means, unfortunately, for Whitney's, I had to put just normal bourbon in her. She's allergic to blackberries.
Wah, wah.
But Starlight Distillery in Indiana makes a really good blackberry whiskey if you need to know where to get that. And then the honey lavender elixir and the fresh lemon juice. And this cocktail's called the Morally Grey.
Ooh.
What? So, very, very exciting. Drink it up. It'll be delicious. Recipes on Instagram.
So good.
Nice. Mindy, will you please spin the wheel of names and tell us who is doing our nerdiest recap?
Let's see. It's Whitney.
It's me. Oh, good. Before we started, dear listeners, I said I'm not studying. I hope it's me.
This is going to be great.
This is going to be so
it's going to be
fun.
super duper. Okay, so Hawke just killed Phillips in the barn, and Poppy is realizing that Hawke is not who he said, and he has totally betrayed her, and she feels absolutely devastated. And he has her sent to a dungeon cell, basically, where he then comes and cleans her wound and tells her all about the truth about her society. Your whole life is a lie. The end.
Her society.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
The only part you left out is the part where she goes bananas on everybody.
Oh, well, that's
Dude,
true, yeah.
she whips everyone.
I didn't study.
So the 8 times you've read this book doesn't count as studying?
I guess not. Yeah. Before we really get into all the hot goss.
The nitty gritty.
Yeah. Mindy, will you please do our nerdiest vocabulary?
I sure will. So we're kind of running out of people, right? I kind of was...
Some of them are dying.
A lot of them are dying.
A lot of them are dying.
Yeah. I didn't bother to do Letty. But...
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Letty. But the one person we haven't done is Elijah. And I've kind of shied away from it the couple times he's been mentioned because it has a very biblical, so yeah. We'll see. So it does come from the Hebrew Eliyahu, which means the Lord is my God or God is Yahweh. There's several different ways to say it. And it is a very biblical name, and it holds a lot of sway in the biblical realm. So a lot of people like to name their kids Elijah because he was a very important prophet. He defended the worship of the Hebrew God. He's kind of a big deal, right? So it's a little unnerving to me to say this, but comparing the biblical Elijah's worship to Elijah's worship of Hawke and Castile, it's kind of borderline sacrilegious.
Just thinking that, yeah, because he does really worship Atlantia and the king and queen.
He's definitely devoted, right?
Yeah.
So, but it feels a little blasphemous to me, and I don't really want to go there.
I scoot back a little bit far away from you in case you get smote.
But we know that JLA, nothing's accidental, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't usually name people without at least a little bit of connection. So I don't know. What do you think her choice represents?
Well, there is that connection between, if you want to talk about kind of working for somebody that not really employer or employee, but, Elijah as a prophet in the Bible would be basically working for God, right? Doing what God tells him to do, much like Elijah in the book is doing for
Hawke, I definitely, like I said, it's you see that connection for sure. But I love what thebump.com, they touted that the name is a reflection of devotion and outspokenness, which definitely fits, right?
That definitely fits.
So I don't know. I'm leaning towards that just because I don't want to like you said, get smote.
I keep thinking from Hamilton, even though this is not the right name. I keep thinking Elijah.
I was going to say the same thing.
Like that's all that's going on a loop in my head right now.
But I did go to the Urban Dictionary, and at first there wasn't a whole lot. I mean, people clearly did not want to tackle this subject because, like, one of them just said a name. Okay. And then
Somebody actually took the time to make
write-
that an entry.
Yes, they did.
I mean, they're not wrong.
Well,
I know. I was a little, underwhelmed there.
was the user like Captain Obvious? The username?
You know, I need to start looking at the users. I don't really look at that, and I really probably should.
Golly G 69.
I was going to say it's balls deep 48.
And then there was one that got a little more specific, but it was just doesn't give a fuck what your names mean on Urban Dictionary.
Oh,
So, okay, Elijah apparently is too good for Urban Dictionary.
all right.
But I did find one that was a little intriguing. So it had a lot of emojis, and I'm going to
Tell us.
I'm going to tell you what emojis were in there. So Elijah is a super bomb dude who is hella fine. I'm reading it exactly as it is. Drool emoji, heart eyes emoji. He seems like a shy, quiet person, but when you get to know him, he's hella lit. Fire emoji.
Oh.
He likes only one girl who is his queen. Crown emoji. He likes her a lot and he thinks he might love her. Shrug emoji, female symbol emoji, red heart emoji. He is very loyal and devotes everything to that one girl and his family. Kissing wink emoji, blue heart emoji. Get you an Elijah. That one was my favorite.
Is this person old enough to be on the internet by
I know.
themselves?
I'm like, this sounds like a youth, a youngster.
She's like, I don't know how to explain myself. Heart emoji.
That is so funny. I use emojis too much, but I don't use them that much.
You don't use them in your writing.
No.
Yeah, well,
Like, if you were writing
only in text.
I was
on
gonna say, it's
Urban
not like this is a
Dictionary, you
text.
wouldn't be like, Castile, heart emoji.
That's true.
Fire emoji.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to Mindy. Thank you to our people that put entries in on
I
Urban
know.
Dictionary.
Thank you for keeping it real.
I feel like we're going back to last week with like doing the Jericho. It's like, we're just
How white can we be?
we're just a couple of
If you
white
haven't,
ladies.
if you haven't listened to last week's, there's a lot we talk about with Jericho, and a sexual act I cannot get out of my mind, and it really is bothering me.
in a not a good way.
No.
Right, no. I did not try the Jericho.
Oh Lord.
No.
I'm
Just
gonna-
no.
I'm going to
Nope,
nope right out of this
nope.
conversation and segue into chapter 35. So we open up this chapter with Poppy has just watched Hawke shoot and kill Phillips. And so she's realizing, oh, crap. Like she's been... this was really hard to read, honestly. Like I knew it's coming. I've read it a million times.
I
but
teared up several times
It was
reading
hard
this.
to
Yeah.
read because she has spent a couple of previous chapters, maybe just one, but she spent all this time worrying about Hawke, right? And have they gotten Hawke? Have the dissenters gotten to him? And like she trusted him so fully that it was not even a possibility in her mind that he could be involved with this. And so for her, it just opens up with her realizing like, oh my gosh, Phillips was right. There's something that I was wrong about Hawke, right?
What sucks too is she's on her knees while this is going on.
I know.
And I'm like, how degrading must that feel?
Well, and she says, my heart was denying it. I'm like, I have been in situations like that, right? Like where I have this information and I'm like, I understand what you're telling me, and I know that what you're saying is true, but the implications of this being true is just like I'm gonna take a minute and just be in denial about it. Like I've been there, and it is the worst. It is the worst feeling.
Sad face emoji, heart emoji.
I got broken heart emoji.
So the first guy you slept with, then you found out he kidnapped you, and
yeah, it was hard to read this. Guys.
right, and then he did not chop you up into little pieces like his friends wanted him to.
Well, no, I mean, he had that redeeming quality about him. at
Right,
least.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
he wasn't all bad.
Shout out to Robbie.
Oh man, that's funny. But no, I think the hardest part to read for me is when she says, like, what is going on? What's going on here? And Hawke says, what's going on here.
Yeah.
Like,
So
come on,
I'm gonna talk ad nauseum on this episode about the first time I read this, I hated Hawke. And this time when I read this, I hated Hawke. Like,
Yes, me
he's
too.
really kind of awful here. Yeah. And I think he's deflecting some, but he tells her right away, like, you and I need to talk. And she's like, fuck you. And he's like, I'm sure you have a lot of questions. It's almost like he assumed they were so close that she would just hear him out.
See, I don't know. I'm with you. The first time I read this and this time, I really dislike him in these moments. But I also feel like in the times in between reading, I've given him a pass. You know what I mean?
Oh, of course.
Like, after you know the whole story.
Right, absolutely.
But I kind of lost a little bit of that, giving him a pass this time.
He
did
is
too.
being a dick.
Well, what I think he's doing, because I agree too, like he's flirting with her, he's being a little
jokey,
flippant,
yeah.
and it's like
He's showing off in front of his buddies.
it's not. Well, see, I didn't take it like that. I took it like I know that he has been really concerned that she's going to hate him forever, and I think that he's trying to get her to like joke back with him a little bit to prove to himself that she's not going to hate him forever, and it's just like not the right
But
move.
that's the whole thing. He's so arrogant that in the scene
yeah.
that he thinks he can do that.
Correct.
Right? Like, oh,
Yes.
she just found out you kidnapped her. You're about to tell her whole world's a lie. But let's joke around a little bit.
But I don't think that it's a like, well, I got to look tough in front of my friends, like a Danny Zuko in Grease, right? Like where he's a jerk at the you know.
Rocking and rolling.
Our younger listeners know exactly what I'm
Grease
talking
was
about.
one of those talking. Grease was one of those talkies that we had back in the 70s.
Oh man, I am an old lady, and that's fine. But I'm gonna have the giggles now.
You're not
for like 3
old.
hours.
You're not old. You're just old thinking.
I'm old. I'm 100 at heart. But no, I don't think that it's like a mean-spirited. Like I don't care about her feelings, or like I'm just oblivious to her feelings.
So
I think it's.
I think he
desperate
does
thing.
care about her feelings, but he is treating her like shit so that whenever she treats him like shit, it hurts less.
Or maybe he's like giving her a reason to,
Right.
you know,
I mean, I see what you're saying. I just don't think. I don't think that he's trying to treat her like shit, though. I really think that he's desperate to know that he's wrong, that she's not going to hate him forever. And it's just like, this is how he's doing that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
I
it's
can
still
see that
like
sorta.
not the right move.
No, it's like
right?
a read the room,
it's-
dude.
Yeah. Like it's just either way, don't do this. You know?
I will say, and this is something that I kind of came to a conclusion with, like, I'm going to really have trouble being Team Hawke. I'm really struggling with it because he's the ultimate morally great character, right? Like we all gush over him in the end. He definitely does the right things later. But who in real life, and I know it's not real life and we're talking about a book, but who in real life would ever be able to trust somebody after this kind of betrayal? Like I never would get over that. I don't know, but apparently I have before because I always end up loving him.
I do think that, I mean, this is probably getting a little bit ahead, but I do think that one of the, I don't know the best way to describe this, but I think one of the reasons that Poppy is able to forgive him is because if she shuts out every single person that's lied and betrayed to her, she's
got no one.
She's literally
Yeah.
alone.
Well, and she doesn't realize he's right, too.
Right. He does. He does tell her the truth.
Right.
Right. Like his
Right.
lie is him kind of telling her the truth, which I
Right.
think is why she's able to look past. But I mean, we talked about in previous episodes about like they struggle with this.
Yes.
I mean, even
Yes.
still, the books aren't done yet. And even still, like there's some things that they
Right.
still struggle with.
She isn't just like, well, that's okay because I love you. And
Thanks for putting your dick in me.
right. It's definitely not like that. But I do have a question that I don't think I've ever thought about until this reading. So in this moment, when he says, like, you know what's going on here, and she's like, oh my gosh, yes, I do. She talks about feeling the pain in her chest of like that, how it's agony. Is that actually her pain, or is she feeling Hawke's pain that he's hurting her?
Ooh, that's an interesting question.
Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But have you, have you ever been so heartbroken that your chest is hurt like that? Like
for
I know
sure.
exactly how she's feeling.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine if she can't shut off her senses and she's feeling his,
Right.
how horrible that must feel.
That was
to
a
her.
an intriguing thought, right?
Yeah.
Of like, I wonder if any of that is his, because
seeping
she's
in,
not
yeah.
in control. Yeah, she's
True.
so upset. She's not
Yeah.
in control. So like you say, Deb, I don't think she's turning her gift off, but maybe she's also not in tune with it because of what's
she's
going
so
on.
out of
So
it,
maybe
yeah.
it is all her feelings.
Well,
I don't know.
and she does say at the end of the previous chapter that he has blocked her.
Well, that's true.
Oh,
That's a
yeah.
good point. I forgot
So
about
that makes it even worse if she's only feeling her feelings.
No. So Poppy is making these connections of like, oh, okay, so you are the one that had Rylan killed. I bet you killed, was it Hannes?
Hannes. I don't know what it is, but
I don't know.
Picturing like a 8-foot tall Swedish dude, like, sweats.
Hans. So Hawke is.
We do have some Swedish listeners, and if that is not a funny stereotype, we're really sorry. But there is an SNL character that used to do that, and that's why I'm thinking that.
Please let us know if we should not make that joke again. And so Hawke's like, well, yeah, I did do that. I needed to get close to you. And she says, well, you succeeded at that, didn't you? And I'm like, ugh. It's really tough.
It's so heartbreaking.
And I loved pretty soon after that, if not immediately after that, Kieran like rolls his eyes at Hawke, which I'm like, Kieran rolling his eyes at this moment is so like spot on Kieran. It's so funny.
Well, also because she still thinks the Dark One is referencing someone else, right?
Yes.
And so she says, so the Dark One sent you here, and Kieran's like, sent? And Hawke's like, motherfucker, don't ruin it.
Shut up.
You can roll your eyes all you want. Stop talking.
Yeah, and that's what he rolls his eyes at. I didn't write down what he rolled his eyes at.
Yeah.
And then Delano is like, I feel like I'm missing something. Like there's something that is not adding up here. They were so irreverent, but when they were irreverent, it was funny to me. And when Hawke is irreverent, it's like offensive.
Well, because
you know what I
they've
mean?
never been anything
Yeah, I guess
but
that's true.
who they are. To
They're
her.
like strangers to her,
Right.
essentially, and he's not. But yeah, I guess
They're
that's
not
true.
even calling her Poppy yet.
I know.
You know?
That's true.
The maid.
Well, and Hawke does call her Poppy in these
call her
chapters,
it
and
in
she's like, "Don't call me that."
Yeah.
Like that's for my family, right? Yeah,
So-
they call her really. I wrote down a couple things.
Yeah, they
down
call her
that
some really. It's just nasty.
rude.
Yes.
Rude. Can we just talk about though how she literally like kicks his ass for a minute?
Yeah.
And
I love that so much.
I mean, he has super sharp reflexes, but he can't read her mind, which is really, really
Yeah.
great. And so like she literally throws a dagger at him that he catches in midair, which is kind of badass. And it says the look of disbelief on his face was almost comical. So then she literally like does all these like dips and jabs and like is like foot sweeping people and like kicking them in the stomach and all this shit. And at one point they're teasing Hawke about how much she's kicking his ass.
I know,
Like,
I love
should
that.
we like step in? And what does Elijah say?
He's
Like,
like,
this
no,
is the best entertainment I've had all week.
Don't stop her. Yeah, and this scene.
And he says, "Who would have thought the maiden could throw down?"
I know. I wrote that.
Oh,
down.
and then Kieran says, this is why you don't mix business with pleasure.
Yeah, and then everyone's like, "Oh," like it all makes a little bit more sense to them.
And then Elisha says, "Well, then my money's on her."
Yeah.
A couple of things that Hawke does through this, which is really... he is really being condescending to her.
Yes.
So when she first attacks him, he says essentially like, that was naughty. And he does that whole, you're so incredibly violent thing, which we normally swoon over. But in this moment, he's being an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And then he tells her she's turning him on. He's laughing while
Yeah.
she's beating the shit out of him. She also punches him in the face in the dimple. And he says, you hit like you're angry with me.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
you are
Duh.
being a jerk.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, he is the wrong move. It is not a good look. It's just like, just be quiet.
Well, and
you know?
it's like, yes, she normally loves that side of you, but would anyone think this is funny? Because you're just
Right.
being arrogant.
right.
Yeah.
No, well, especially like what you were saying about how he looks so shocked that she's like fighting him.
I can't believe
that's
she's
the
upset
arrogance.
by this. Like,
for sure. Like, he didn't think she was going to do that
Right.
to him.
Like, she'll
Yeah.
literally just sit down and have a conversation with me, even though she just found out I'm not who I said I am. I've kidnapped her. I've killed people. And now she feels, and I am kind of responsible for killing people that she loved.
Yeah.
Well, and you got to wonder if he was just up front, like if she'd heard it from him, if she would have reacted differently.
And maybe before you fucked her.
Exactly.
I think that's just
Well-
more
Yeah.
offensive because he lied about who he was
Yeah.
before he fucked her.
I will say too, in a slight defense of Hawke, I don't think I do. Okay, hold on. I think that his plan was to talk to her, not in this way. Because remember, Phillips came to her room when he wasn't supposed to.
Right.
And Kieran was coming to check on her.
Like the shit was hitting the fan.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the plan, first of all, whatever Hawke's plan was, also sucked, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Also,
it was still not okay.
I mean, we can't do the whole boys will be boys thing because he could have told her who he was
100%.
before he slept with her.
Yes, 100%. And he totally should have. And he, we talked about this last time, right? Where he's like, I should be a good person and walk away, but I'm not gonna, he's at least self-aware that he's being a dick.
Well,
right?
we did learn in one of the previous episodes that lust can really alter your thinking.
Yeah, no,
right.
that's
and I mean,
totally
like,
true.
how many people have done stupid things because they're horny? But this is a pretty big stupid
It's
thing.
a big, major.
You're falling in love with this person and you want to have a relationship with them, so maybe you set a foundation first.
Well, and
Go ahead.
the whole plan, it's not like a spur of the moment thing. Like, he's been planning this for years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
and it
it's a
literally
lot.
took her like 3 weeks to break it down.
Queen.
He's like, well, 25 years of planning and 3 weeks because she's awesome.
And maybe this is unfair, but in the position he's in,
Which position? Like doggy.
as
like
a high-ranking public person, he should be setting a better example. I know that sounds very like a mom thing to say, but
that's not who he is.
exactly,
ultimately.
exactly.
And I wouldn't say
Right.
his parents are very good examples
No,
either.
they
No,
aren't. No, they
well, at
aren't.
least his mom. Maybe his
Well, and
dad's
we
a little
find
better,
out.
but-
I'm listening to Crown of Gilded Bones right now, and we find out that like they've killed people that have learned about Elysium to like
Yeah.
keep the secret. Which, I mean, I wouldn't say I agree with that, but I understand why they're doing that. But
Yeah.
his parents, who are supposed to be like these upstanding citizens,
And-
have done
and-
a lot of
yeah.
horrible things.
horrible things. Yeah. No, that's extremely true. And one thing that I was reminded of this time reading that I don't know that I've ever really put together before, when she sees his fangs and realizes that he's Atlantean, she still thinks that Atlanteans are like the worst
Right.
kind of evil. And I know she kind of talks about it in the chapter, but I guess I just didn't really remember like how horrible she thinks they are.
Well, and she still thinks that the Atlanteans are basically the Ascended. Like,
Right.
She thinks the Atlanteans are what the Ascended actually are.
Right. Yeah. And so part of her like disgust and devastation and horror at herself and anger at herself is based on this like misunderstanding,
Right.
right, of what Atlanteans are.
Well, there's also a couple of things that are very humiliating for her in this scene. Magda comes in and literally like pities her,
Yeah.
like looks
Right.
down
Yeah.
at her like, oh, you poor fucking thing who had no idea. They're screaming from blood and ash we will rise all around her. They keep calling her that
Yep.
Yeah.
instead of a person. And so to your point, she's on her knees. Hawke has now like essentially tackled her to the ground while laughing at her, and everyone's watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for me, I'm a very loyal person, so like kidnapping or not, I would have been like, well, this is done. Like you
Yeah.
just let everybody, like, why'd you let
Yeah.
people treat her like that?
I
And I understand he has to keep up a facade too, and I'm not sure if he realizes how deep in he's in with her yet.
I don't
But still, I mean,
I think
it's fucked up.
I think that, well, and again, A Soul of Ash and Blood, the Hawke POV comes out in about a month for us
I
at this
can't wait.
point. But I'm hoping we'll get a little bit more insight.
It'll just
but
be once this. Yeah. Once this episode airs, it's 3 weeks, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll get some more insight, because I just envision that his mind this whole time with this encounter with Poppy is him trying to figure out, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what the plan is supposed to be. And all these people hate her and want her to die, but I want to keep her. So how am I going to do that? And now she hates me. How am I going to fit? You know what I mean? And so I feel like that's just constant in his head of like, let me just wait a second. Let me send her to this cell. Let me gather my thoughts. Let me go hug Kieran for a second. I feel like that's probably what he did.
He goes to Kieran's room and he's like, I don't need you to say anything, but can I have a hug?
I just need a good hug right now.
We walk in and he's laying in Kieran's lap and they're watching Gilmore Girls.
I really feel like he just needed a minute. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, it's just tough. But in Poppy's position, it's just tough. And so he sends her to this cell, which is really to protect her from the people and also to protect the people from her. Yeah. Which I love how he's like, it's more likely that she's going to attack you guys. So like, let's keep her separated from everybody.
Can we talk a little bit about the irony that she's finally escaped her like mental prison and then she's thrown in an actual one?
I know.
Really heartbreaking.
Well, and she just left the prison that she didn't realize was
a prison.
An actual prison. And it just sucks. It all sucks.
I know we're super early in the episode, but I need a cocktail refill.
No.
Well, I'm getting up and I'm in front of the computer.
That sounds great. Let's do it.
Yay.
Craft cocktails don't have to be fussy or ingredient heavy. Make and Muddle is here so that you can have a delicious 3-ingredient cocktail every time. Spend more time reading and less time mixing. Make and Muddle. Cocktail evangelists here to spread the good news about booze.
So once Poppy goes into this cell, this actual physical cell, that has like a literal, I'm picturing like a yoga mat on the floor. One thing I noticed this time when I read it, and I just want to read this, it says, I looked up sheddering. The ropey, twining bones reminded me of the roots of the blood forest. They climbed and overlapped one another, rib cages and femurs, spines and skulls. So this is all over the cell, which I had never caught before. And it makes me wonder if they're bones of deities to hold the gods and people with primal power.
I wonder that too.
And I'd never caught that before because, again, I just got done with the beginning of Crown of Gilded Bones, and that's how she is tied down. So it's really ironic that those are in there, but also you have to wonder if being near those were like weakening her in any way.
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
Because, I mean, she's not going to feel good in this instance, right?
Right.
But, like...
That's a good question.
Everything's achy, and I wonder if it's due to the bones. But
maybe.
I did laugh during this because Delano comes in, and this is kind of where you start to fall in love with him, and he brings her some food, and he's like, it's not poisoned, and he's like, I would have brought you stew, but it was really good, and I knew you'd throw it in my face.
I don't want you to waste it like that. I don't want you to
waste good stew.
I know. I loved that too. I do want to back up for just 1 second because I didn't mean to skip over this. So before Hawke sends her to the cell, we've got Jericho, who is like the absolute worst, like taunting her.
Who she continues to mock,
I know,
by the
right?
way.
Which is hilarious. But I just wrote this down. So Jericho... He threatens her life in the barn. He threatens her life. He taunts her devastation. He calls her a bitch. And he's the one that slices her. Is that my understanding that right? So
I thought that's what it was too, but it says later she tells Hawke that it just happened in the scuffle.
So he didn't actually cut her. I guess.
Thought he did.
See, I thought he did too. So let's say that's a maybe. But he definitely did all those other things, right? And he did all those other things in front of Hawke. So, like, how did he not die sooner than he does? You know what I mean? Like, he does all that stuff to Poppy in front of Hawke, and other people
I think, though, he's defending himself, isn't he? Because this is when she has started beating the shit out of everybody.
Well, also, Hawke is still... He's still playing a role for his... Like, they don't... I mean, Kieran knows that it's... And they've sort of hinted at it. But... Doesn't when that whole thing happens with Elijah and that after she starts like hanging out a little bit more and like she's becoming a little more becoming a little more used to her, and I don't know, I feel like at this point it's still very new that she's even there and that this is actually, they actually have her there and that they're actually going to go do this. Like, he doesn't want him to know that. Now, I think if Elijah actually like threatened her life, that I think he might have
Jericho.
Jericho. If Jericho had actually like gotten to where he was like about to kill her, I do feel like Hawke would just go off deep end.
But isn't it threatening her life to be like, remember, I promised I'm gonna gut you and bathe in your blood?
Everyone there said they wanted to cut her up.
I mean, I guess that's true too.
And she's holding her own at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, he probably is like, shit, I don't have to say anything. Because she's like, that true. Sounds awful for you. Like, I love it. I love that. And I love how JLA points out that when she stabs him, she's like, and then he covered the blood up with his one remaining hand.
I didn't even notice that.
And I was
funny.
like, yeah, asshole.
That's really funny. Well, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I'm like, Jericho totally sucks.
Yeah.
And he should have died a long time before he did.
He gets his.
So
He
cut back to
definitely
the
does in the
cell. It in the cell, she's kind of just like sitting by herself, Poppy is, and it really hurt my heart of like, I can't believe I was so stupid. Like, of course, he totally like manipulated me and tricked me, and I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. I was just so alone and so desperate. Like, I'm such an idiot.
I hate how, as a victim, she's putting all the blame on herself.
I know, me too.
But like,
Well, I wrote down too purity culture because we've talked about this in previous episodes, and I said, how would this have been written if it had been a guy? Right? So like a guy would never be saying like, well, she had sex with me and I gave myself to her, and like that's not usually a literary like device that we would
No,
use.
but it would be she seduced me to have sex with her.
right.
You know
So
what I mean?
no
Yes,
matter
it
what, the
definitely
woman
would.
is
At
the
fault.
right,
The responsible party.
Yeah.
Right. And she is really putting the blame on herself. Like, why did I let him inside of me? You know what? Because you wanted to. That's
Well,
okay.
and how could she have known? Like, he said and did all the right things.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what a predator does. And so it made me wonder, like, where does all this predatory behavior come from?
Am I going to need to make a slide?
You
for-
might at the end
is,
of this.
Is Hawke a predator?
First, I want to talk about a little bit about in the animal kingdom, really more like insects.
Like Disney?
No, like
That's like all I picture.
like
Circle.
Hakuna Matata.
no in the
They're all
like
stabbing each other.
particularly insects and fish have this. It's called aggressive mimicry, and it's this way that they
I'm sorry. You're saying bugs, insects,
Yes.
but not like in
during sex. No,
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
I thought you were
Bugs
talking about
and
intercourse.
fish.
I was like, wait, what? Sorry, I'm dumb.
Certain predators will do this aggressive mimicry, and it's basically making themselves look some way, or somehow they have features that will draw prey into them, right? So first there was this false cleaner fish, which I thought was such a weird name, but basically a true cleaner fish has a mutually beneficial relationship with like other bigger fish, and they'll go like they'll basically like lure all these other fish to them and then go through the whole pack, like eating all the parasites or the dead skin or whatever off these big fish. So the cleaner fish gets fed and the big fish gets clean, right? But the false cleaner fish, because some fish have to come in and be an asshole and ruin it all, right?
The hawk of the fish.
Yeah. The false cleaner fish mimics the coloring and mannerisms of the cleaner fish to lure in a fish wanting to be clean, but instead he takes bites out of it. Instead of cleaning it, he actually like eats it.
Oh.
Yeah. Rude, right?
Very rude.
And actually, I probably need to put a link to this website because the pictures are terrifying of these things.
Can't wait.
There's also called ant mimicking spiders, and these are the ones that were truly terrifying. So they have a pair of legs. They wave a pair of their legs in the air to look like antenna, right?
Whitney and I both started waving our arms in the air.
But they do that so they can infiltrate an ant colony and drag lone ants away to be eaten, right?
Aw.
And then even worse,
mean.
no, it gets worse.
Oh,
The
great.
males have their mouth is enlarged to look like an ant head, and when their prey gets close, it splits open to reveal their fangs, and they pierce
Holy
their prey and eat
shit.
it.
Oh my God,
Gross.
that's
I know.
terrifying. Why are you telling us this? My whole skin itches right now.
I'm gonna go to my happy place.
The orchid mantis is of the mantis family, and it disguises itself, as you would think, like an orchid flower. But their actions are actually called a hyperstimulus because their colors are more vibrant, so they are more appealing to their prey. So basically, their prey are looking for orchids, but they look like better flowers than an actual orchid, so they draw them in that way and then eat them. And this one I think you might kind of recognize because when I looked it up, I was like, oh, I think it was in Finding Nemo. No, that's the ones. It's like a lanternfish. It's got the little it almost looks like a little fishing line off it. Basically, that's a fleshy growth on the front of their heads, and it acts like a fishing lure. So they attract their prey there, so they get close to their mouths, which are huge and have lots of teeth. They can even make it look like there's a worm on the end of it, like it's an actual like fishing line. And some are bioluminescent, so they can be seen in deeper water. That's where you get like the ones that look like a lantern. And then they eat them. And then finally,
Cool.
this is only a few of these. Then
I don't
finally,
even have anything to say right now.
the spider-tailed horned viper. This is a snake that has a bulbous structure on the end of its tail. Basically, it's got this thing that looks like a spider on its ass that has fake legs jutting out, and it looks just enough like a spider that it lures in birds. So the snake is like perfectly camouflaged.
So the bird thinks it's getting dinner, and it's like, oh shit, an asshole.
Yes. So it's camouflaged everywhere else, but it moves this like spider tail thing around, and then the bird comes down thinking it's going to get a meal, and it gets eaten instead.
Aww.
Predators are rude.
That's a bad dinner.
So then we move
You ate
on.
asshole and got
And then got eaten.
She's like, I didn't ask for tossed salad.
So that brings us to the human predator, or
Yay.
So
Is it psychopaths?
hang on.
Or sociopaths.
When I say,
or hero
okay,
complex.
So when I say the word predator or sexual predator, when I'm talking about a person, what do you think of?
Honestly, I think of Chris Hansen.
I think of a middle-aged white man.
I think of a guy in a white van.
Like to catch a predator.
Yeah.
So
All those go together.
it made me think, is Hawke a predator? And so there's, I know.
Calm down, Whitney.
I definitely feel an infographic
I'm just
coming
glad-
on here.
Infographic coming.
I'm just glad it wasn't me this time.
So there are, from the website faithit.com, 13 male predator personality traits. And so we're going to do like check boxes, right? They seem too perfect. Check.
Well, until this chapter.
But to her,
Wrong.
he seems too perfect. She constantly talks about how like he looks like a god, and he, they are
He can't help his looks.
They are entitled. Check. They are masters at exploitation, like knowing weaknesses and using them to their advantage. They feign intimacy, and I put an X on this one because it says they pretend to be what you need them to be to gain your trust. And he kind of does, but he actually really does want to be with her.
Yeah.
So that's an X. That's one.
He's prepared to do whatever he needs to gain her trust, but
Right.
he doesn't actually like fake anything.
Right.
Yeah.
They must have control. So you could argue either way here. He's definitely in control of situations, but I don't think he's necessarily in control of Poppy completely. And even like wishes for her.
No predator
independence.
is of their victim fully in control of them.
But I think he actually wishes for her independence. I don't think he
sure.
wants her to be controlled by
He's not trying to control
Yeah.
her.
So I put that as a toss-up because it could go either way. They suffer from low self-worth. And at first I was like, no, but then I started thinking Hawke doesn't think Poppy deserves him. He feels responsible for his brother's capture.
He doesn't think he deserves Poppy.
Right. That's,
Oh.
is
He
that
also
what I
doesn't
said?
think he should be
That's what I
heir
meant.
to the throne.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I check on that one.
And he thinks he's a monster from
Right.
his captivity.
Well, and he even says that in this chapter.
Right.
And she says you're a monster, and he says, now you're starting to get it, basically.
And he also says, I wasn't born this way. I was made this way.
Yeah.
Which is very true.
They cannot empathize. And I actually put an X on that one too, because I don't feel like I feel like he can.
He definitely empathizes
Yeah.
because we've talked before about
They've had a lot of heart-to-hearts
he
about.
points out like you're treated horribly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's part of the psychopath versus sociopath thing I discussed in a previous episode.
Let's not go back there.
So the next one I thought was very intriguing. They love vehemently, but they also hate vehemently, and they often switch quickly between the two.
Check.
All right. They easily find fault, but not in themselves. So like they're obsessed about other people's wrongdoing, but can't see their own.
I don't know if that's
I know.
No,
I put a toss up because Hawke is obsessed with all wrongdoing, I think.
Yes.
Even his own.
Yeah, he definitely sees his
Of course,
own
he does
wrongdoing.
it anyway, but
Right.
but I put that as a toss up because it could go really either way.
Yeah.
They are likable, often the life of the party, fun to be around, and popular. Check. They are the victim. Basically, they make excuses for bad behavior or blame the actual victim. And I put a question.
He does kind of do that.
Because he, in this chapter, even he says, Poppy, what am I going to do with you? When he comes to see her. And that one just really burned me. I don't know. I just wanted to smack him and punch him in his fucking dimple. Like it just, and he's sighing. What am I going to do with you? Like, I don't know. So
I have a teaser from his POV of that.
Oh, yeah.
that moment.
Oh, I
actually.
can't wait.
Yeah.
So I put a question mark on that. I didn't put yes or no. So I'm going to leave that one sort of up in the air. And then a couple more. They flatter. Hawke is always complimenting Poppy. Check.
But he means it. It's not like false flattery.
Well, I don't think all of them don't mean it either. I think it's just they do it a lot. Any predator's going to flatter.
It's a charisma thing.
Yeah. And finally, they are never, ever wrong. Check. I feel like.
Yeah. In this instance, yeah. I mean,
Well-
here's the thing. Whether or not you like it, Hawke's
No,
a predator
he
in this.
is.
Yeah, I mean, 100% he is. But he knows he is.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like he's like, oh, I'm doing good for them, or I'm trying to, he knows what he's doing.
So here's my
Right.
question. So the conclusion is that he has 2 X's, 2 toss-ups, 1 questionable, and 8 checks. So that's 62%. So it's above half, right? So is he a predator? I think yes.
In this situation, yes.
And why is it okay that he is? Why do we end up okay that this happened?
I think part of the reason is because Poppy ends up okay that it happened.
Well,
Yeah.
you do find out more about why he did it. He wasn't a predator just so. I think a lot of times when you think of predators, you think of sexual predators, and it's usually for sexual motivation only. And that wasn't what his first goal was, right? It was not to have sex with her. It was to kidnap her and ransom her and
Well,
send her back to
I
the
think
ascended.
just a predator in general, if we're taking sex out of the equation, they are preying on somebody to get
What they want.
Yeah.
I think that part of it is because Poppy forgives him, and if she forgives him, we as the reader that gives us permission to forgive him too.
Yeah, I can
and
see
I
that.
think part of it is the motivation that he has is coming from a good place
As well
right?
intentioned.
Like he doesn't have like nefarious purposes for kidnapping her, right? It's not like I saw this
I mean, some people would think he does.
to save his brother generally is going to be seen
Yeah.
as a positive
I know, I'm just
thing,
saying.
right? You're just trying to be difficult.
I'm truly struggling with this. Like, I'm like, why am I okay with this?
The other thing too,
but that makes
is-
sense that it's like this is where Poppy.
We're brought to the same conclusion that she is at the same time she is,
Yeah.
which helps.
Yeah, because she's our narrator, right?
Yeah.
Like it's her POV, so
Yeah.
we are taken through the same journey that she's on. But also, I think that a major key, not just that Poppy forgives him, but also that the Ascended turn out to be so horrible,
Right.
and the Atlanteans are not.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, oh, you're not so bad, which we allow to kind of mask over the negative things.
He does lie to her to get what he wants in a very predatory way, but to my point earlier, is he is the only one that ultimately tells her the truth, which I think
Yeah.
also makes
Yeah,
him more
that's
forgivable.
true.
Well, and he's absolutely a predator in this situation because he is literally hunting the maiden,
Yeah.
right? Like he's trying to get her, and that's the definition,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
he very much is, but it's
But he's not grooming her in any type
it's
of
not
way.
as black
That's
and white
true,
as that,
yeah.
you know?
Right. Yeah. Because
it doesn't feel as dirty.
Right. A predator would try to shape that person into who they need them to be for what they want.
Like the queen and
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Duke
Well, and I think
yeah.
exactly to your point, I think that's ultimately where I ended up was that he wasn't trying to change her or even make her feel less than. He's actually building her up in a way that's not contradictory to what he actually feels.
He also saves her.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times when you're talking about a predator you think stereotypically is taking somebody from a good situation and taking them to a worse situation, and it's not that way with Poppy.
Now, I will
you know?
say something in her mind that does not bode very well for him here is he tells her the truth and then tells her, but I'm going to give you back to him.
That's where I went to.
And that's what's hard with this predator talk because, like, if he, I mean, and you do learn he does have feelings for her. And at this point, he really has no want to give her back. And he
Right.
doesn't plan to at this point. But as the reader, you don't know that.
tells her that.
Right.
though.
But you're like,
Right.
dude, you're just so, you just told her they feed on children and they have to have an Atlantean to ascend. And you told her ascension's nothing what she thinks it's going to be. And you're going to give her back.
And she says that too.
Yeah.
Like, you want me to believe all these horrible things, but you're
gonna
still
send me right
like,
back.
how does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Why would I trust you at all? You
Right.
know?
And why are you telling me all this if you're just going to send me
What's
back?
the point?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is a predator. No infographic, guys.
Oh, dang What about a 46-point PowerPoint?
Oh, why it's okay that he's
Yes.
That's really where we're heading here. So he walks in. I'll go ahead and read that teaser of this moment. She's, kind of lost in her own thoughts. And Hawke...
I'm sorry, the teaser to where... Can you give me setting again?
A Soul of Ash and Blood. Which
as he walked into her...
Oh, he is like standing in the doorway.
Okay, thank you.
Looking at her.
Sorry, I was still reeling over him being a predator.
Of the prison.
So this is from A Soul of Ash and Blood, which will be published in a month. It's the Hawke POV. This is when Hawke is getting ready to walk into her cell. So he's like in the doorway, basically. I stepped forward, my gaze drifting over her. She sat on a thin, dirty mattress, her back pressed against the wall. Her face was pale, but her stare was defiant as ever, brave, bold. Poppy, I sighed, hating that she was here, loathing that she was here because of me, but knowing the moment I let her out, things would be worse. What am I to do with you? So I think that what I was saying earlier, like he's constantly in his head trying to figure out, like, how am I going to get her out of this? How am I going to get me out of this? And
how am I going to rectify the situation without it blowing up in my face?
And also, like, I hate myself because I have done this, but I did it anyway. Can
I point out too? So because to what you're saying here is he feels like so guilty. He's still got to kind of move forward with this plan that he doesn't know how to get himself out of. When he starts talking to her in the cell about who the Ascended are and what they do, she says, because she still thinks the Atlanteans are responsible for everything, she says, Ascended don't murder innocents and they don't turn people into monsters, which is a horrible, horrible thing. But he thinks the worst thing that could happen to her is, he says, no, they just force young women to make them feel inferior, to bare their skin to a cane, and do the gods only know what else to them in return. Yes, princess, they're truly upstanding examples of everything that is good and right in the world. And I'm like, you're so caught up in your head over her and what you've just done to her that you forgetting that they eat babies. Which is a lot worse than, they should not cane her and abuse her and keep her caged up. But the Ascended do far worse.
But
things
keep
than
your
this.
eye on the big picture, dude.
Right.
Well, but I think he's trying to point out, this is one thing that I actually really liked about this scene, and I think this is an example of it, where he is asking her basically to use the information that she does have to see that he is telling her the truth. And
That's
so here,
point.
I feel like he's just pointing out, like, okay, so let's say I'm wrong about what I'm saying, but what do you actually know that they did?
Yeah.
They abused you for years.
Have you seen them do anything positive in the world?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he does that later, too, with the temples. She's like, they don't steal babies. And he's like, has anybody seen them?
Right.
Literally anybody.
And here's
just
the
one
thing,
kid.
this
right?
isn't the first time he's brought that up to
Exactly.
her either.
Yeah.
Earlier in the book, when the dissenter throws the hand at the Duke, and she says, like, well, what is he talking about? Hawke says, well, he kind of has a point. He goes, if they would show one child of the god, people would stop dissenting.
Yeah.
And she doesn't even stop to go like, oh yeah, that is weird. Like, it takes him chaining her to a wall to get her to listen.
Yeah. And he is right, but I really like that JLA did that in this scene where it's not like a, you've got to listen to me, Poppy. Like, he's just like,
damn you, woman.
Yeah. Like, I did do a very dramatic, like, Jimmy Stewart kind of performance there.
Why I oughta.
Again, our younger listeners know exactly who Jimmy Stewart is. Everybody totally gets that reference. Very timely. But no, he's using the information that she does have to show her, like, think about it for a second. And you know I'm right. Like, you can't argue against what you actually know to be true, right? Like, you may not know all these things that I'm saying, but you know this and you know this and you know that. And that's enough to understand that I'm telling you the truth, right. So he basically, like, lays it all out for her. Like, let me tell you the truth about your history of our people.
Hawke's Blood and Ash story time.
It is. Didn't he say story time? Or maybe he just
said, let me tell you a story. And she's
Yeah.
like not having it.
I know.
She does not want to do Blood and Ash story time.
I know. Oh, she should,
Poppy.
though. Come on, Poppy.
What are we going to do with you?
I wrote down Twilight moment because he says he's gonna.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
He says like he's gonna clean her wound or whatever, and she acts like she's gonna fight him on it, and he's like, as if you could stop me, as if you could outrun me.
And also at one point in the chapter, she talks about how he was incredibly fast and strong. And so I kept going like, oh my god, no, this is not Edward.
Yeah, I did appreciate too, before he goes into his big story time, he essentially like reveals to her or confirms to her that he killed the Duke, and that he killed the Duke because he found out what the Duke was doing.
And she says she's humiliated that he knows.
I know.
And I'm like, again, like you're focused on the wrong
thing. I wrote that down too. I'm like, it's equal parts like, ugh, dude, just like this is not the moment, but also he can't help but like be protective of her.
Yeah,
you know.
Right. She does say something that continues to be a theme of her personality later in the book. She says, just because the Duke and the Lord, and she's talking about asshole Mazine, were horrible and evil, that doesn't make you any better. And then it says that doesn't make all ascended guilty. And one thing she really advocates for later in the books is making sure that they don't just mass kill the ascended.
Give everybody a chance.
Well, and part of that is, and he points this out to her, that like he totally hits a nerve because she doesn't want to believe that what he's saying is true, even though she questions everything, because she doesn't want to then have to believe that Ian is a murderer.
Well, and he tells her like, "Oh, so your brother's eating babies," and she's like, "No, he's not."
I know.
Like that's awful,
I mean,
and that's a mean thing to do to
it
her.
really is,
moment.
and it's a really, really harsh.
And
personal
he's trying
struggle
to
for her.
essentially like be like, "Dude, listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying to you right now."
Yeah.
And so he's trying to use this like shock factor to get her to listen, but that doesn't work
on
for
her. No.
Right.
You know, and it wouldn't work on him either, to be honest.
Can we point out too that he basically forces her to let him help her, and then she makes her feel helpless, which is what she's been working on for years.
That's what I was just about to say. Yeah. So he's telling her all this stuff while he's like cleaning her wound, which, to be fair,
it needed to be done.
a thing that happened, right? Like she needed to have that wound cleaned, but she feels completely helpless, and she knows like he is stronger than me. He is faster than me. Like he's an Atlantean and I'm not.
How long's he been 17?
Yeah, right. I wrote that down too. Like the most heinous, there are two things that I find to be the absolute most heinous things in this chapter. That is number one, the fact that he makes her feel helpless, knowing everything that he does about her. And number two, when she kind of blurts out like, was any of it real?
Yeah.
And the fact that he doesn't immediately answer her and kind of give her something to grab onto that isn't just complete betrayal and devastation, it is so upset. It is deeply upsetting to me. But yeah, the making her feel helpless is just, it just makes me really upset. I did really enjoy reading this chapter because weeks ago, my friend Amanda that listens to our podcast, shout out to Amanda.
Shout out to Amanda.
When we were talking in earlier episodes about kind of like cults and conspiracy theories.
Conspiracies.
Yeah, conspiracy theories. And she was like, okay, so let's think, how do you go from somebody who believes a falsehood to being suspicious, to being questioning, to believing conspiracy theories, to accepting the truth, right? And I was like, that's really interesting.
Psychologically, I don't think a lot of people can.
Well, that's kind of the journey that Hawke is asking Poppy to take, right? And that is also kind of the journey that she takes. And so I was thinking through that, and I think that Poppy fully bought into all of this for the entirety of her childhood while she was still at Wayfair Castle. In my opinion, we don't have any evidence that she was questioning anything. Number one, she was a kid, like a young child.
You're not going to question your universe.
Right. And number two, she still had the queen who treated her much better than the Tiermans did. Yeah. Right. So she was much more comfortable, much more comforted, much more loved by the queen. Then she gets sent to the Tiermans, who immediately the Duke starts abusing her, right? And she's away from what she's used to. She's getting a little bit older. She's getting into those teenage years where you start to question stuff around you anyway, like developmentally. And that's where I think she starts to get suspicious and starts to question things. And then she...
Well, she does have a moral compass, and she knows what's right and wrong. And she knows that they are not always doing the right thing on big
sure.
scales, right?
Yeah.
Like they're
Right.
making bad decisions.
Yeah.
Morally.
Well, and then she starts getting involved with the cursed, going with Victor to help, and she's getting exposed to different ideas and different people, right? So she hears about the conspiracy theories, like starting with that, but it takes, I guess, the whole experience with Hawke to push her to truly believe the conspiracy theories, you know? And I'm like, that is a lot. Like, I mean, it's her whole life, but to go from questioning to believing a conspiracy theory for her is a really quick
And not
jump,
even
you know?
just like
A short time frame.
Not even a conspiracy theory on like, some people think we didn't land on the moon. So we're going to use that as an example. It's not even as simple as that. It is her entire worldview.
Right.
Exactly.
And I mean, I don't know very many people that wouldn't psychologically crumble under that type of pressure.
Right.
I started thinking about cults, and I started thinking about, you believe what people tell you, and then you realize that it's not the truth, right? So I'm going to do a little bit of a backwards deep dive. So first I'm going to tell you about a man named Ted Patrick. Ted Patrick is from Chattanooga, Tennessee. He was born in 1930. Seems like he was a super smart, like very driven, motivated guy. He dropped out of school, born in 1930, right? Dropped out of school in the 10th grade, which would have been the end-ish of World War II. He dropped out in the 10th grade to work for his family, to provide for his family. And by age 25, he had owned a business and was like doing okay for himself. When he was 25, he left his wife and baby in Tennessee to go to San Diego. It was not very clear if it was like, I'm going to go to San Diego to make money for us as a family, or if it was like, peace out, I'm leaving. But I think it seems like it was peace out, I'm leaving. He lives in San Diego. So this is 1955 at this point. He became an activist for the Black community. That activism led to connections that led to a job under California Governor Ronald Reagan, which I thought was interesting.
Now, is he Black or is he?
No.
Okay.
He's white. So he says that sometime later, I'm not exactly sure the timeline of this. He says that his son was in a cult, and Ted deprogrammed his own son. And he had no training, no education in doing this, but it was like, my son was in trouble, and so I was going to do whatever I needed to figure out how to help him, kind of deal. Part of what he did to prepare himself on how to help his son was go to New Orleans to see somebody that he was taken to as a child to help him with a speech impediment, and also said that he talked to a lot of witches, warlocks, and healers to get the information that he needed to deprogram his son from his cult beliefs.
Sounds legit.
Which
Yeah.
cult? I am not sure. What beliefs?
Not sure.
Unsure.
Which cult? A big cult. Sorry.
So he started talking about this experience with his son publicly. And then, in the 70s, we had a lot of new religious organizations, cults were popping up all over the place in the 70s, right? And so he was talking publicly about what he says is his experience with his son. And I was not able to corroborate that with like anybody else's testimony, I guess. It's just him saying, well, this is what happened. So I don't, take it with a giant grain of salt. So as he's talking about this publicly, parents of adult kids who had joined these cults in the 70s were like, oh, I need you to help me with my kid because my kid joined the Moonies, or my kid wants to go to Jonestown, or like, those are
Right.
the only ones that I know.
I was like, keep naming cults. I'm fascinated.
Yeah, so like whatever, right? So Ted Patrick created what we know now as deprogramming, or he pioneered it. I'll say he pioneered it. I got all this from Wikipedia, by the way. So thanks, Wikipedia. So deprogramming is a tactic that attempts to help someone who has strongly held convictions coming from cults or any strongly held beliefs. Deprogramming aims to assist a person who holds a controversial or restrictive belief system in changing those beliefs and severing connections to the associated group. So it is literally like retraining your brain to not believe the things that you believed because of an authority figure, a group, whatever. So, in the 1970s, lots of parents of adult children who had joined cults used deprogramming and asked people to deprogram their kids to help them. It was extremely controversial because it can take a person's autonomy away. And by that, the people who were being deprogrammed often were not willing to be deprogrammed. Right. Parents were hiring people like Ted Patrick to literally kidnap their kids and like snatch them from their homes or their jobs or off the street or whatever. And Ted Patrick was actually charged multiple times and convicted more than once for false imprisonment and kidnapping. Oh, wow. And there was one case where he was paid $27,000. This was in 1980. So $27,000, first of all, still a lot of money, but in 1980 is a lot of money. He got paid $27,000 to deprogram a 35-year-old teacher whose parents objected to her involvement in leftist political activities. So no evidence that she was even like in an actual cult, right?
Oh, gosh, she was a Democrat.
I know, right? That's what I thought about.
Shout out to Democrats.
This reminds me of the whole sending your gay kid away to like pray the gay away or like whatever that is. That.
So with this particular 35-year-old female teacher, he kidnapped her, chained her to a bed for 2 weeks, and denied her food in his attempt to deprogram her from these beliefs.
That's going to make her listen to you.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
So she actually decided not to press charges, but that's just one of the examples. He was charged multiple times for kidnapping and false imprisonment. He was acquitted several times as well, but not every single time. He served time in prison for kidnapping people. So there is no standard process or standard procedure for deprogramming. It's kind of just like, well, this is how I do it. And all these different people were deprogramming other people with just like, well, this is what I'm going to do. So we're just going to do it like this. Yeah. And some people, would have been like actual psychologists, and some people were like Ted Patrick, who were like, well, I did it with my kid, so it'll work for yours too, right? So the way that you deprogram somebody. So let's think about Hawke telling all these things to Poppy, right? First, you have to discredit the figure of authority, which Hawke is doing with the Ascended, right? Like they're lying to you. They're not who they say that they are, right? So you got to discredit the figure of authority. Then you have to present contradictions within that belief system themselves, right? So like you're
the temples and
exactly
like why haven't we seen kids,
right? Well, and you as the maiden are supposed to be highly regarded, but you're being abused by the Duke. Like, how does that make any sense? Next, the person that you're trying to deprogram has to have their breaking point where they actually start to listen and truly like give weight to what you're saying to them, which I think for Poppy is the scene here, right? Mm-hmm. Then number 4, and there's only 5, self-expression. The subject that you are trying to deprogram has to speak something negative on their own from their own feelings, right? So it's not just you saying negative things or telling them what you believe is false. Like they're coming up with something negative and willing to see the authority or the group or whoever it is, willing to see them in a negative way, which means that they're actually listening to you. And then lastly, they identification. So you identify with the person deprogramming you, being on the same level as them. Like, yes, I hear what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. And you transfer your basically loyalty. You transfer your loyalty from the group that you were a part of to the deprogrammer. I disagree with them now. Now I agree with you. Mm-hmm. And so that's how you deprogram somebody. And so that's basically what Hawke does, right? Like this is her breaking point. She is listening to him. She's going to start speaking on her own of, yes, I see what you're saying about the Ascended. Yes, this is horrible. That shouldn't have been happening. And she absolutely identifies with her deprogrammer and transfers her loyalty.
Well,
right?
She's never, ever, that I can't think of, said that she does not trust him. So when he starts telling her this, she already has a deep level of trust. And then he has visual proof. He has a royal crest branded on his thigh that she already recognized.
Yes.
And didn't want to believe that that's what it was, right? Like, oh, that looks super duper familiar. And then when he says it, she's like, oh, fuck, that is what that is. And then he has this personal experience and she does not necessarily think he's lying. She just doesn't know if he's right about what he thinks is right.
Yeah.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so, like,
he definitely thinks it's true.
Right. And she thinks that he thinks it's true, but she doesn't know if she quite believes that yet. But him having the visual, I think, really helps prove his point. Right.
Well, because we talked earlier in the book where she said about that guy that threw the Craven hand at them, like, if he's going to make these claims, he's got to have proof. Right.
Yeah.
And so Hawke actually has at least one small piece of evidence on his own skin. Right. But yeah, I thought that was, it was very accurate, right? Like what Hawke is doing is deprogramming,
right.
and he's following all of those steps. And it made me think a lot of, I talked last week about watching the Shiny Happy People and talking about the Duggar family and the IBLP and all that stuff. The Duggar girls that are now speaking out against that kind of way of growing up and that way of thinking, like, they are having to deprogram themselves. True. And I've really liked watching the Leah Remini Scientology show. Like, she was a Scientologist for almost 30 years or something, and she's had to deprogram herself too, right? Like, to figure out, like, what is actually true from what I grew up believing about the world in general, and what is absolute false. Yeah. That's a hard place to be.
You've got to be a pretty strong person to be able to do that too.
Right. And
which,
not completely
unfortunately, a lot of people who join cults and things like that are already very
susceptible to influence.
Exactly. Yes. So I bet it's harder. Now, this is the way, like with Leah Remini and with Poppy, that's the way they grew up. They didn't know any different from birth.
That was normal.
And they had that inner strength to overcome that. Some people don't have that, which is just sad to think about.
Yeah. But again, I love that Hawke, he is presenting what she already knows and is basically asking her to come to the right conclusion and not just like hitting her over the head with it. Yeah. Because she's smart. Yeah. And she's capable to do that.
This is one of the when he becomes so vulnerable and talks to her about being fed on by the Ascended and essentially raped also. Yeah. That's the one moment in these chapters where I do actually feel like he's 100% being authentic, and to make himself vulnerable like that, I definitely felt for him more than any other time in this chapter when he's being a total dick. Yeah. Like that's pretty,
I would agree with that.
That's pretty.
I feel like too he's really angry at this point. He's angry that his plan has gone to shit. He's angry that he's fallen for her, and he's angry that she didn't want to just sit down and talk about it and trust him that much. And so he's like, well, you know fucking what? They raped me and drank my blood.
And he's probably angry that Phillips like went in and messed up whatever he was gonna do.
True.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and during this time in the chapter 2, I really loved reading again about how the first Vampire was made and how it was part of Isbeth and Malek and how he did all the stupid shit, but then the Atlanteans kept letting more Vampires get made, and he explains the difference between the Craven and the Vampire. But one thing that really stuck out to me that I had never remembered was that the Ascended have to feed frequently to prevent whatever mortal wounds or illnesses they suffered before their ascension from returning, which I did not know. How did that never stick with me before? Because I want to think back, and next time I read this, I want to look and see, like, were there any ailments or anything that it seemed like the Duke or Mazine had that, like, they were falling apart from or anything like that?
I'm really interested by that too, but I'm afraid that it's going to end up being one of those things that like Atlanteans thought was true, but it's not. You know what I mean?
They just said that so they could feed more often.
Right. Yeah. For their bloodlust maybe. But I noticed that this time too, and I had the same like, wait, how do I not remember that detail? I thought the exact same thing.
Also, the detail I hadn't remembered is that his mother was the one that outlawed ascensions again. So like Malek was like, oh fuck, I fucked up, so this is legal. And then everyone was creating Craven. And then Queen Ileana was like, so actually this is creating a huge problem, and like we have essentially like this not famine, what's the word I'm looking for, like pestilence across the country of Craven. So maybe we don't do
Let's not do that.
But Malik, in terms of like cult thinking, was so in the like, I'm right about this, that he's like, well, I'm just going to legalize it. Because you should get to do what you want to do and get to be with who you want to be with.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I was reminded of as well is that even Hawke doesn't know the whole story, because he says
That's true.
Isbeth was the first to ascend, not your king and queen, but it is its queen.
Right.
They're her
and
queen.
she's not actually ascended.
Yeah.
Right.
So he doesn't have the whole story at this
Right.
point.
I mean, I think they still don't have the whole story.
Well, I don't either.
Up to this point in the books.
Yeah.
Well, and we
book
talk
4.
about propaganda a lot in the podcast, and he even talks about how they use a level of truth to spread falsities, which is what propaganda and any type of like regime does. Is they're like, we've got this little snippet of truth, so if you question anything, you're like, oh, okay, and then they change it up a little bit where you're not going to ask any questions.
Yeah. You have to be really, really smart to be able to do that, which is
which
scary.
I'm always like, why are you using that to like cure cancer?
Right.
Right.
It's frustrating. One detail too, kind of going in a different direction. One detail that I had forgotten is that Hawke gets a boner here. And I wrote down, he is a deviant.
Yes.
When does he get a boner with?
When he puts her up against the wall, right?
Yeah, she's trying to fight back or something, and he's got to push her up against the wall, and she's trying to get away and rubs up against him.
Oh, yeah, because he says something like, I'm always in the mood for honeydew, and I put, okay, first of all, very asshole thing to say.
Yes.
And then later on, when he's done like cleaning her wound, which I'm sorry, he put peroxide on it. Fucking chill out. You didn't say
It probably had ether.
ether, right?
Ether peroxide.
Right. So he put peroxide and Neosporin and a bandage on that shit, and then he's like, "I'm not gonna get a thank you, am I?"
know.
I'm like, "Dude, fuck you!
Yeah.
You kidnapped her.
You're definitely
She's
not gonna get a thank
chained
you."
to a wall. She's
Right.
laying on the equivalent of a yoga mat, and she has a huge cut up her side from a guy that already tried to kill her once.
Yeah.
So you can go ahead and fuck off.
Yeah.
And when you want to be nice, you can come back into the chapter. Hawke Flynn.
I know, right? Like, just go meet with Alistair and leave us alone for a minute.
You know what? Don't go meet with Alistair. Go chop that fucker's head off.
I did have a couple of questions at the end, which maybe we'll get these answers with his POV book and maybe not. But I don't understand why. I really don't understand why he's still like trying to have her not know that he's Castile, that he is
Thank
Castile.
you.
I
had
felt
that
like
same
it was.
thing.
I felt like it was one more blow that he didn't want to give her.
Yeah, but I mean, I get that, I guess, but it's like, I mean, you might as well just tell her everything.
But
'cause-
he's still specifically too, instead of like
Also, he's
skirting
not the
around-
dark one, and he knows that.
I don't think he knows about the Dark One in her past, does he? Have they talked about?
Yeah, they've talked about
They
it.
talked about the Craven, but that they
but that the dark one came.
sent the
Sent the Craven.
But he knows that they all think he's the dark one. And
Yeah.
he, to me, he refers to himself and the one she calls the dark one as two different people. Like he specifically says that. I'm like, he didn't have to do that, really.
Yeah,
like there's
it's
some weird
really
things.
weird.
I will say it was kind of funny when he says, "You belong to me," and she says, "Don't you mean I belong to the dark one?" He said, "I meant what I said."
yeah, I wrote that down too.
he's like, "Get there faster."
yeah,
But
right.
then he goes right back to referring to himself and the prince as two different people.
I know.
It's
That's why
very
I just,
confusing.
For me, I'm just like, dude, because I get the whole like it's one more blow, but also she's gonna be pissed when she finds out.
I
It's
think he
yet
knows
another
he-
thing you haven't told her.
He's
you know?
fucked no matter what.
Well,
so
yeah,
he's
that's
like, if I
true.
could
It
make her
kinda doesn't
less
matter.
mad in this one moment,
I feel like at this point, and nothing against JLA because she's a freaking brilliant writer, but it almost feels like at this point she's throwing that in there as a red herring. It's like a writing device and not really a character thing
I mean, maybe.
Maybe. That's true.
to throw us off a little more, to keep us thinking that he's not. Because at this point, obviously, we don't know that.
I will say that when I read this for the very first time, I was 1000% sure that Hawke was the Dark One's brother.
Oh,
I thought that
Really?
I thought he was going to end up being Castile's brother. When he did the reveal of like, you know, the Dark One has a brother and he's taken, like I thought Castile was really going to be the one that was like
Gotcha.
taken, and that he was going to be the brother.
I will say the good thing about reading this, like when it came out, like Mindy and I did, is that there weren't tons of spoilers online.
No.
Now, if you're looking at it, you're like, well, who's Castile? Because she's hanging out with Hawke all the time. And the same thing happens in the Guild series by Raven Kennedy. Yeah. I saw some spoilers and I was like, well, who the fuck is this guy? Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm still not going to say what that spoiler is because exactly it's a good one. Talking about, but I was like, I still need to when does this other guy come into play? Like,
well,
this
it's like Akatar, right? Like
Tamlin and
in the pictures, he's got really dark hair, but this guy's blonde. Yeah. So it's. I also don't understand. And I guess this is just a wait for the POV book, but like, dude, just like give up on your ransom plan. Like, you're still trying to make fetch happen, right? And it's like, just stop. Like, what are we doing here? It makes me crazy.
She told me I couldn't wear hoop earrings, even though I got some for Hanukkah.
Right? I'm just like, why are you still trying to make this a thing? You're obviously not doing it. Yeah, just
it's already. I think it's already off the rails now. Regroup and go different.
He still thinks he's going to be able. He still is trying to convince himself that he can go through with it because he even goes to meet with the king to tell him he has her.
Well. That's what he says in this book, but I wonder if we're going to find out in his POV. But I do think
he does because later you do find out that Jalara wanted him to kill her.
Jalara's
not Jalara.
Valen,
I'm sorry,
Valen. There are some teasers that I'm like, what did you actually go do when you told her that you were
got rid of his boner?
Well, I mean, I guess. Never mind. I'm not going to make that joke.
I wish you would.
So the chapter ends with him and his boner, and he does at the end of the chapter say, "Not everything was a lie," and I'm like, "Dang, why did you tell that?
Why'd you wait that?
Long? Like the freaking story without telling her that anyway,
because she would have been distracted, and he knew that.
Well, that I guess, but." I mean, it's just a big, like, sad trombone series.
One thing I wrote just to bring it back
up. I got a little Tamlin in this chapter.
Yeah, to bring it back up to the funnies, I did write in my book when he tells her how old he is, and I'm like, oh, I love a 182 year age gap. Because one thing we did memes last week on the Instagram page, and one of them was like, age gaps with 20s and 40-year-olds. I am sorry, but when you are 20, you have nothing in common with a 40-year-old. 30 to 50, yes. 40 to 60, yes. 20 to 40, no. But apparently, I think 18 to 200 acceptable.
It's just so out there that it's like doesn't even matter.
Well, he also does not act older than her.
Well, yeah, that's true. He's very immature for his age.
And it's also not real life.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
What?
He is real. Yeah. So let's go into our nerdiest things of the week. Who wants to go first? Mindy?
Okay, me. I have a couple. So my husband and I finally got to go on our roller coaster trip, and we went to two amusement parks. We went to Cedar Point and Hershey Park. And we'd been to Cedar Point before, but we had never been to Hershey Park. And
Please stop saying that.
What, Hershey Park?
Yes. Whitney's cracking up.
Well, because I was going to make a Hershey chocolate joke, and then I decided
I was going to make a diarrhea joke.
I was going to say... Never mind. I'm not going to say.
Not where my mind goes.
We're just a bunch of 13-year-old boys over here.
I'm as immature as Hawke is.
How many roller coasters did you ride?
I rode more than this, but I added 19 new roller coasters to my coaster count. And yes, I do keep a coaster count. I have an app.
19 new ones?
In 2 parks?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. There's like 13 in... the one in Pennsylvania.
Diarrhea land.
Was it fun?
It was amazing. We had a great time. Even though my husband thought he found some great lodging, and we ended up in a cabin that didn't have a bathroom. But that's a different story. But we made the best of it. It was fun.
He tried real hard.
He did.
A for effort. And shout out to Darren.
You got to shower in the community shower. Not everybody gets to do that.
That is true. That was true. It wasn't a new experience, but it was one that I haven't experienced
when
since
it's
college.
An unexpected experience, it's not as fun.
No, it was very interesting. No, we did make the best of it, though. It wasn't miserable or anything. It was super fun. And the other thing is that as soon as we got home, because I haven't really had a chance to read as much since school's been out, because we were planning for this trip, and I had some weird stuff come up in my personal life. And so I really haven't read a whole lot. So I was looking forward to getting home and reading. And I had a book waiting for me, and it's the new book by Helena Hunting. It's A Love Catastrophe. Catastrophe. It is about she is a kitty whisperer, which is a huge joke in the whole thing because,
like a pussy?
Yes.
Or like,
yes. And her name is Kitty too. But anyway,
Kitty cat.
she but it was a cute book and it was fun, but I read it in one day because that's how we do.
Fun.
Yay.
The kitty whisperer is gonna
It's
gonna be making me
it's
laugh
definitely a
all
joke
week
throughout the
long.
whole book. So
That's hilarious.
The kitty whisperer. I think Hawke's one of those too.
Well, I'll go. I have two. So one is I read in the car. We went on vacation last week and I read in the car on my Kindle and it was great. And I was reading this new series, new to me, the Beasts of the Briar series by Elizabeth Helen, which is actually like a sister duo that writes and edits books together. But it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I was texting you guys because I was so confused reading this whole book. I'm like, I mean, it seems really obvious that this, obviously this girl is the Belle and like that guy is the Beast, but there's also like 4 other male characters and it kind of seems like they're all the Beast, but like it's Beauty and the Beast. So like what's going on here? And then after I read the entire book, I looked up the author on Instagram and in their bio it's like, we write why choose fantasies. And I was like, okay. And then book 2 just came out. Like I didn't realize that, but I read the first book and then like the next day book 2 came out.
Can you tell the listeners what the first book is called?
Yeah, the first book, well, maybe
Isn't
I
it
can.
Bonded by Thorns?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
because it's
Bonded
huge
by Thorns
right now.
Bonded by Thorns is book 1, and then Woven by Gold is book 2. And book
they're
3
on
comes.
KU.
Yes, book 3 is coming out, I think, in December of this year. But book 2 is like, yes, this is a why choose. But book 1, I was just like, am I dumb? Am I missing it? But no, it was good. It was enjoyable. It is a why choose.
I was
Is
just
it
putting
spicy?
Bonded by Thorns in our show notes, and I put Boned by Thorns.
You know what? You're not too far off. But then that was my first one. And then my second one is we picked up a puppy today. We have a mini golden
He's
doodle.
so cute.
And the nerdy part is his name because I wanted to choose a book name like Reaver or Hawke. And Robbie said, anything that is from any of your books, I'm going to veto. And then
Why'd you tell him it was from any of your books?
he asked me directly. And
Lie.
I can't. I'm not a good liar. And so he and my son wanted to pick sports names. And I was like, absolutely
Hey, slugger.
not. Yeah, I'm like, absolutely not. So we said, well, what do we all like? We all like Star Wars. So we named him Chewie for Chewbacca.
Cute. And he does
so-
have brown fur.
He does.
He does.
His fur
He
looks
like
totally the
Chewie.
color.
I
Yeah.
know.
What if
That's
he
exciting.
ends up being that tall? Will that be weird?
That would be insane and a little bit frightening.
Yeah.
But
What if when he barks, he goes, "Oh"?
what was that, Mindy?
I'm not good at Chewbacca impression.
that's really funny. I can't do it either. I'm just like, but no, my daughter today said that his full name is Chewie Star Wars Weaver, which I thought was really cute.
That's
so
cute.
See, I
that's
think
my
Reaver
nerdy thing.
Weaver sounds cuter.
I know. I thought that was cute too, but like, is that from one of your books? Like,
Yes. No. I mean, no.
yes. But what about you, Deb?
So it makes it sound like on this podcast that I go to murder mystery parties all the time, but I don't. I've just happened to go to 2 this year. And so I went to one last weekend and it was on a cruise ship. And I was the cruise like activities director. And my character had to change at the last minute to this due to unforeseen circumstances within the party. But so I ordered like a little like skirt cruise director outfit off Amazon for $30. But then once I got it, I realized it was actually a Sailor Moon cosplay. But no, like I went and like no one in that group knew who Sailor Moon was.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, come on, people. It's actually really, really cute. And I'm like, I should get a little blonde wig for the next cosplay that we do and just be Sailor Moon.
I think I have one.
A Sailor Moon wig? Like
Well, I don't know if
little
it's a
piggies?
Sailor Moon, but I have one from when I cosplayed as the Morton Salt girl.
Oh, yeah. I
at
could
the
put little
Supernatural
piggies off
con.
of that.
I still have my Dean Winchester.
I still have my
If you
I
wanna
still have
borrow
my
that.
mullet.
I still have my mullet, too. And if you don't get that reference and you watch Supernatural, it's when we took our picture with Ash.
Yep.
And we thought everyone would be in mullets. And he was like, oh, my God, that's awesome. And he posted it on his Instagram.
We're famous.
Thanks,
a good-
buddy.
it was a
What's that
good
guy's
day.
name in real life?
Chad Lindberg.
Chad Lindberg. You would know him from like Ghost Hunter.
Shout out
shows.
to Chad.
Chad Lindberg. Thanks, buddy.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Next week, the fallout from the betrayal continues with chapters 37 and 38.
Dun dun dun. Goodbye.